Warhammer's main defining trait as a setting is its focus on grimdark elements, which is the term that they use for marketing because the setting is edgy as shit. Doesn't sound quite as good. Warhammer can refer to two settings, 40k and Warhammer Fantasy. Both are massive tabletop wargames from the 80s, and today Warhammer Fantasy has basically no cultural relevance outside of Total Warhammer, which is, for reasons stated in this video. 40k, on the other hand, does so many depictions that Racevic made an entire video on how many 40k games, books, and shows there are. Both of the settings are definitely products of their time. A lot of media is generally optimistic. It's not uncommon to see a story pull a happy ending out of its ass, even when that goes against the established tone and themes, just because, well, people like to feel nice. 40k doesn't do this. Everyone is miserable all the time, no matter how ham-fisted it has to be. Don't expect any subtlety in 40k. Its main theme they constantly throw at you is, in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. And boy, is there a lot of misery in this setting, as it's so abhorrently huge that it's the poster boy for horrific scale problems. I didn't bring this up in my video about that topic, not because I didn't know it existed, but because 40k scale is so bad that it's actually just an inherent point of the setting. Bringing it up as a problem example felt kind of pointless because it's such a core part of the setting and its identity. Even though the scale being ridiculous isn't inherently bad, that doesn't make it good either. 40k's scale is atrocious and way too big. This isn't just me being a pedant either. 40k's way overly large setting makes it basically impossible to give a shit about anything or anyone. You know how the big centerpiece of Star Wars is the big orb that can blow up entire planets? That was scary because the rebels are established to have, like, one main stronghold. In 40k, every single faction is so large that there are no stakes. Nothing that could ever happen will have any impact. For example, Cadia, an Imperial Guard fortress world, blew up, and people won't shut the fuck up about it. It literally exploded after being smacked with an artificial meteor, and everyone treats it like 9/11 when it literally doesn't matter at all. The Imperium have countless of fortress worlds, Cadia becoming the Eye of Terror, and being a new incursion point for demons barely matters because the Imperium has millions of worlds. Even the Great Rift that Cadia's fall probably ushered in can't really be that impactful because the setting is so huge. A gigantic black hole could open up and swallow trillions of Imperium citizens, and you couldn't make me care when there are still quintillions more living just fine elsewhere in the Empire. To go back to the Star Wars example, the sequels literally made this mistake with Starkiller Base. Inventing another star system no one's ever heard of, only to then promptly obliterate it, gives the viewer very little room to care. The outrageous scale obliterates any shred of believability that the setting has, but that's okay, because believability and realism is very clearly not a focus. It's meant to be ridiculous, and some media uses this in really good ways. I like that in Mechanicus, your ship, which all of your operations are headed from, is so comedically large that you can have an entire rebellion pop up in the small civilization localized within the ship's hull. What I don't like is that this massive ship is only capable of sending out detachments of at most 6 NB icons at a time and some bench warmers. So the scale has its problems, but if that was my only issue with the setting, it would be fine, because it can be used in interesting, novel ways and not every single piece of media needs to be extremely grounded and realistic. Unfortunately, in 40k, there's no one to root for. Just about all of the factions are devoid of a reason to care for them, or a compelling motivation to see them try and achieve. It's horrifically stagnant. It's not uncommon to see time just pass a few centuries in a character's story, because, like Bethesda, 40k writers have no idea how long 200 years actually is. I'm gonna gloss over each of the factions very quickly as to not waste your time to prove this point. The Imperium are fascists with Nazi eagles embroidered everywhere who don't want to do anything other than kill Xenos, and if that set of traits doesn't make you uncomfortable, you probably have a Death Corps of Krieg profile picture and questionable flags in your room. The Space Marines are supposed to be this really heroic and, dare I say, epic set of characters, but their army just looks incredibly dumpy. It looks like they're off to the pool wearing their set of giant inflatables. Some Space Marine designs pull off the look like the Stern Guards, but the base design is just, Chaos doesn't help either. I'm not gonna sugarcoat this whatsoever. Chaos Space Marines look fucking hideous thanks to their obsession with strapping everything down with spikes. The Imperium Marines' motivations boil down to stand around looking really epic, and Chaos motivations boil down to stand around looking really edgy. They both pretty much exist just to hate each other. It's hard to root for Chaos when they look so comedically over-the-top ridiculous, and are often reduced to having no depth whatsoever. But I will say that stories involving them and the temptation of the warp have the potential to be interesting. Space Marine almost got there. With the Imperium out of the way, that leaves just the Xeno factions left, first off being the Eldar. They're whiny elves who fucked so hard they birthed Sex Cthulhu and now do nothing except wallow in self-pity all the time while wearing dunce caps. I hate the way these guys look. There's Necrons, really slow robots with laser guns that want to genocide everyone. I would imagine that I would like these guys quite a lot, but they lack much character as most of their units are just like Minecraft skeletons, sometimes in Egyptian clothes, lugging around really silly looking oversized cannons. They have a melee unit covered in flesh called Flayed Ones, which are so stupid that I cannot take the entire faction seriously. That leaves Orcs, Tyranids, and Tau. Orcs have very little motivation other than to fight, and so they don't really make for interesting characters, though they're probably your best bet for happiness if you did get reincarnated into this shithole. Tyranids have no motivation whatsoever other than to eat, which I couldn't really give less of a shit about. I have a hard enough time eating in real life as it is. Finally, there's the Tau. They were originally released in the early 2000s, and to such a bad initial reception that they've had maybe 2 total depictions since their release, and half of those are Dawn of War 1. The reason? They're not edgy enough. The Tau are basically China with mechs, and their whole society revolves around the greater good. Essentially, its citizens are willing to lay down their lives and make sacrifices if it benefits the society as a whole. Kinda like a hive mind, but without losing the individuality of every single citizen.
For the greater good. For the greater good.
For the greater good.
This is a very cool concept and a great idea for society, but since then Games Workshop has had to repeatedly make this more edgy, sinister, and fucked up, because how dare anyone in this setting be even remotely likable? Unlike pretty much everyone else, the Tau actually have a vested interest in diplomacy and aren't out to murder everyone else for being different. Other species can live in their empire, albeit as second-class citizens because 40k is but as subtle as a door breach. I like the Tau for a lot more than just their narrative vibe. They also have the sickest aesthetic vibe out of anyone in the setting. Now obviously this is crazy subjective of course, but I will gladly take the giant mobile battlesuits over the hulking lumbering ones that look like animatronics. These mechs are pretty much exactly Titanfall sized after all, and they scale up quite a bit larger than that. I think their look in general is fantastic, especially when compared to more contemporary factions. The Imperial Guardsmen do look cool, but they're very dull. That's Guardsmen specifically. I do think some of their infantry look absolutely fantastic, like Ogren, Kasserkin, and Scions, specifically the ones from Dawn of War. The new models released for Tempestus Scions look absolutely hideous, but at least they're led by Captain Price. Base Guardsmen are just kind of like dudes with a Kevlar plate and a stool on their head. Tau don't really have the specialized infantry of the Guard. Their equivalents to Kasserkin and Scions are various different types of battlesuits instead of infantry. That means that all of the Tau infantry are these fire warriors, and so it's a damn good thing that they look fantastic and radiate gender envy. And they all have an actual motivation, trying to improve things for the greater good. As I said though, this feels walked back on today versus when they originally released. It feels like there was some board meeting that went like this. So, the Tau are willing to make sacrifices for the benefit of others. Well, that sounds great, but the Warhammer fans are incapable of detecting subtlety, so we have to be as blatant as physically possible. The greater good has to be pushed by an elite class of ethereals promoting propaganda and also societal level mind control, because that is a logical conclusion to make. We can't have any characters willing to do anything legitimately honorable. They have to be pushed by some sinister, fucked up means. After all, collectivism is only a theoretical concept and has not been practiced for thousands of years. While we're at it, I know their whole ideology is about improving society for everyone, but let's have them be inexplicably racist with every other race that lives in their empire reduced to second-class citizens. After all, we need to hit our Grimdark quota or else the Nazis and fascists out there will boycott the current edition, only to buy the next one anyway. Now, look, I really like bad endings. Revenge of the Sith is probably my favorite film for this reason, but 40k shoves bad endings everywhere that are so ham-fisted because it's mandated that no one can ever be happy and there can be no hope. The tragic, grimdark element of the Tau should be what the Farsight enclaves represent. Though they're led by someone who's effectively immortal with good intentions, they're like 5 planets. Their depressing element should be that they're too small to ever have any greater impact. Farsight's story shows this ham-fistedness pretty well, and in such an aggravating way too. They had such a great point to end his story that fit the themes of the faction, and decided to simply not end it.
There are plenty of stories in media where a commander or leader realizes the organization that they're fighting for is evil. That's pretty much the only story Star Wars ever tells. Farsight's story is similar, but unlike other media where he'd stand up to them and post an expose video online, owing to the idea of the greater good, he chooses to instead tell no one and exile himself to prevent ever spreading such a heresy out of fear for the unrest that it would cause. That's great on its own, it should probably have been left there, but they of course had to then make the Ethereals cast him out and brand him a traitor and wipe him from history and all that classic horse shit, because once again 40k can't be subtle to save its goddamn life. Now, Warhammer is from the 80s. It's a huge franchise today that's ballooned way past its initial scope of just being a board game. These issues are pretty standard for a multi-billion-dollar franchise with hundreds, if not thousands, of writers. As I said, all of this that we have now was originally to facilitate just the war game Tabletop 40k. Like most war games, it has a lot of rules. The rules for 40k Tabletop are insanely poorly written, and so consistently. It comes off like they were written in Hungarian and translated 7 times. As far as I can tell though, the rules don't allow for most factions to be mixing and matching with other armies. I honestly don't know why, because it seems pretty balanced without this. The rules are already there, and you wouldn't really want to make a multi-race army because it's just not very efficient. Online army builders like New Recruit are even built to allow for this and let you mix factions as you will, and I highly doubt that anyone you play the game with casually will give a shit. If you show up with a homemade force with opposing factions and come in with a story for why they're together, I bet people are gonna find that pretty cool, in fact. Narratively, as almost every single faction wants to kill everyone else, you'll rarely see any people playing diverse comps because you'll get extremely weird looks if you show up to play an Imperium army with a little Tyranid pet detachment, but that would be awesome. It's like playing as Wayland Yutani. The Tau, on the other hand, canonically work together with other factions, and so making a multi-faction army isn't anywhere near as ridiculous as it is with almost everyone else, even though the rules for 10th edition don't let them have allies at all for some reason. Having something like a human artillery detachment in your Tau army is even canon thanks to the Guavesa. They have human fire warriors. The Guavesa were in previous editions but have been lost now. I don't have enough experience to say for sure, but the situation with Warhammer Tabletop seems to me like a repeat of the Stellaris situation, rewriting the game constantly instead of just improving it. For anyone with lots of experience with different tabletop editions, let me know if they are in fact just rewriting the game over and over, or if it is getting better. The Tau in general seem pretty forgotten, and it's disappointing. I think it's pretty childish that people reacted to them with such distaste because they weren't filling their endless desire for misery porn. I am happy there is at least one faction worth rooting for, not that anything in the setting is ever going to happen. The broadside model from Dawn of War is the coolest broadside model out there, by the way. Fight me. I will only accept arguments against this that are a minimum of 3 paragraphs in length. I got super sick while making this video, not like I'm sure you can tell with how my voice has probably drastically changed between this and the last piece of audio, including more kidney stones, which is awesome. They're gone now, allegedly, and I'm probably bankrupt. Very, very, very big, genuine thanks to all the people that have already thrown money at me at Ko-Fi. Next time we get to talk about Helldivers 2, a great innovative title that has never been done before. I can't wait. I can't wait so bad, in fact, I'm actually going to flashbang you with this really shitty meme. Thanks to my patrons, and me especially. Like, comment, subscribe, you know the drill, and have a good night.